Yo YouTube, what's going on? It's your boy SalvationsElite. We're back with another video, guys, and today, guys, as you can tell from the title, this could be a little bit of a controversial video because we're going through some of the players, their performances, and we're going to be focusing a lot on the Dashy versus Simp conversation in the video and the Black Ops 4 player performances overall. So do you guys know, like, when you get a present for Christmas and you know, you're not that into it as a kid, you're kind of like, you know, it's fine, it's whatever it is, it's kind of cool, but it's not that great. You play with it for like a day and then you don't touch it ever again. That's kind of what I thought I had with this little stat sheet, as you guys are seeing right here. I downloaded it last week. I didn't spend that much time on it. I was like, maybe I'll come back to it eventually, but I actually did come back to it this weekend, and it ended up being really interesting. So anyway, I was going through it all, and you know, I just thought, man, this would be a really fun video to dive into the statistical analysis of like what happened in this league. As you guys know, stats aren't everything, but when you sort it like this spreadsheet did, it means a lot more. So as you guys can see in the spreadsheet here, let's go through it real quick. It's sorted by main AR rankings, flex rankings, SMG rankings, all right? So that's important, first of all, to differentiate between those roles, because AR players don't do the same things as SMG players. Flex players don't do the same things as SMG or main AR players. That alone would skew the stats, so you have to have them sorted into those categories, at least at first. And then as well, they were nice enough to sort them into hardpoint and search and destroy stats inside of each flex rankings, AR rankings, and SMG rankings. So it really gives a pretty good breakdown statistically. Again, it's not really easy to translate between SMG, flex, and AR players. Like, you can't directly compare statistically Octane to Simp just because they don't play the same role. They're trying to do different things. Main ARs play slower, more tactically, and they play the really important map control positions, or they're watching long lines of sight and then search and destroy. So again, they still do the same things. That's why it's really hard to compare across positions. But when you start out positionally, like this stat sheet is, you can really tell some interesting things about players' strengths and weaknesses and how it all breaks down. So I think I'm just gonna go through a few things that I noticed that were really interesting, talk about some of the great players, and of course talk about Simp versus Dashy. Obviously, it's not a perfect situation, and that's why this isn't like the final end-all be-all ruling of who the best players are, but it is interesting to point out that there's anomalies and there's things that you don't notice all the time while playing that stats show, and there's things that you do notice while playing that stats do not show, and why guys can be so important to a team or so crucial to a team's success that aren't shown on the stat sheets. So basically how this is all organized for this, I downloaded the list and then I added in the ranked categories. As you guys are seeing here, the ranked categories showing the rank of where you are in that stat category. So for example, Simp was the #1 ranked SMG in hardpoint in KD, the #5 ranked SMG in hardpoint in kills per 10 minutes, etc. And the average hardpoint rank for him was a 3.3. So on average, he averaged a 3.3 ranking in every single category across the boards. That's really good. Obviously insanely good. But again, some guys did have different types of roles and they didn't play maybe an SMG for the whole year or whatever it is. Like, you know, Priesta didn't always 100% of the time run SMG, but he's listed as an SMG in this list. So those are the types of things you have to take for consideration. Obviously, Simp would snipe a lot in search and destroy. So there's those types of things you're just like, all right, well, that's just different and not the same. That's why it's not 100% translating across the board, but again, it still shows really interesting statistics. But yeah, I mean, in hardpoint for the SMGs, Dylan was an absolute monster. Look at this. Look at all the #1s he had already in stats. #1 in multi-kill rating, #1, and then like even #3 in KD, and even #6 in time in the hill per 10 minutes. So that means he was even playing as an objective player. So he finished with a 2.2 average hardpoint rank, which is incredible. An insane stat for him there. But then Simp was the next closest at a 3.3, still really great across the boards. And Priesta was fantastic, Hook was fantastic, some really good players there. And that just shows, I mean, the stats do point to many of the really great hardpoint players in Black Ops 4. But you know, of course, in Black Ops 4, unlike some Call of Duties, you have to take the specialists into consideration. It's so important. Scump did run Crash for most of the year, and so that does attribute to his lower damage per 10 minutes. But you know, a guy like TJ's higher in damage per 10 minutes because he's running War Machine, you know, whatever it is. That's kind of how it goes. So you have to take all that into consideration when talking about the stats. At the end of the day, there's outliers and guys that performed way above the average, and that's who's most important to talk about with these stats. So transitioning over to search and destroy for the SMGs, you look at this, and there are some guys that really do stand out. Priesta, oh my, really good at SND. number 1 in first blood percentage, number 1 in KDA per round, number 2 in kills per round, number 3 in KD ratio, and even 12th in damage per round. So he was really, really good and topped the SMG category in search and destroy. Simp was so close behind him, which is why overall Simp is the number 1, because that's what this is currently sorted by, is the overall average between search and destroy and hardpoint. What's interesting is I didn't weight this whatsoever, because you do more often play 2 hardpoint matches in a series than S&D, which is why statistically hardpoint is slightly more important than search and destroy, because you may only have to play 1 search and destroy match, where oftentimes you'll have to go to a game 4 and play 2 hardpoint matches. So that's something to consider when thinking about these stats. But at the end of the day, Simp still topped the category with a 3.8 overall average between hardpoint and search and destroy per stat category, which is so important. So then, with that all considered, this is the most interesting and telling statistic of them all. I didn't really know what to label this, but I was the one that added this in. Percent better than the average of the next 5 is what I labeled it. Really wordy. I know I need to come up with a better name. This stat here is the average of the next 5 people behind them. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically what this stat is saying here, that Simp is 47% better, or has better stats than the average of the next 5 players. So I thought that'd be a good tell of how dominant they are compared to some of the most elite talent in their category, and that shows how valuable they are of an asset to a team. So you can see that Simp was 47% better than the average of Pristo, Hook, Dylan, and Envoy, and Abizi, the SMG category, when it comes to all the stats rankings. So he was really, really dominant, but so was Priesta. He was 42% better than Hook, Dylan, Envoy, Abizi, and Asim, who were all really, really good players year long. And then it starts getting a little bit narrower. You have like Hook at 30%, 29, 33, 27. So it gets narrower and narrower, and you really get really, really narrow down here in the bottom half. So as you can see here, when you get past Scump, nobody's above 10% better than the next 5 players. So it's pretty telling to show how valuable they are in comparison to other guys that could potentially fill their role. When it comes to SMGs, these guys were really, really valuable. Simp, Priesta, Hook, Dylan, Envoy, Abizi, and Asim were all really, really valuable and did a lot for their squad statistically. And again, there's differences. This isn't all encompassing, but it shows how dominant Simp was when it comes to SMGs. So with that all in mind, now we're moving on to flexes. And this is where you see the dominance from Dashy on the season was really undeniable. He was so good. So if you look at hardpoint, he average ranked a 2.3 in all the categories. He was number 1 in KD ratio, number 1 in kills per minute, number 1 in KDA per 10 minutes, number 1 in damage per 10 minutes, 7th in time in the hill per 10 minutes, and 3rd in multi-kill rating. So he was frying in hardpoint, and he was still really good in search. As you can see here, 3rd in KD, 6th in damage per round, 11th in KDA per round, and 6th in first blood per round. So he was still really good. One of the top 3 or 4 in the search and destroy category as well, which is why he finished with an overall rank of a 4.3, and he was 49% better than the next 5, which is really good players in Celium, Attach, Slasher, Temp, and GodRx, who were fantastic players all year long. But Dashy was 49% better than them on the year in these stat categories, which is insane. Like, that feels like that shouldn't be possible with that many great players involved here. That's crazy, man. You got to put respect on these other 3 guys here. Celium, Attach, and Slasher were fantastic. As you can see, they were 32%, 31%, and 29% better than the next 5 up for them. So that's obviously pretty telling. And again, being above 10% is really good. So all these guys are sitting here in good shape. Skies was 24% better, 20% better for Gunless as well. All of these guys here were fantastic. So many great players in this list here. So it's really hard to be 49% better than some of the best that are there. And that's what Dashy was doing. He was so dominant this season, and specifically in hardpoint, he was unstoppable. One of the things that stuck out the most to me was Attach and how dominant he was in search and destroy for EG. He had top 5 stats in every single stat category. That was really surprising to me with how dominant he was in search overall. And again, there was plenty of other guys that were really good. Of course, Dashy, Celium, they were both really good. So was Temp, surprisingly enough. So was GodRx. You know, so there were some really great players. All of these guys played really well, all the way down to Skies. They were really really good in search and destroy. And then you start seeing a little bit of drop off here with the averages for the most part. Lucky was still really good in search and destroy as well. You know, there was definitely a drop off, and there's a lot of variation in the hardpoint search and destroy. So this is where you might start seeing some of the substitutions come into play in Modern Warfare now that subs are allowed mid-series. So maybe you guys see the S&D specialists come to play, the hardpoint specialists come in for those rounds, whatever. Who knows if we even have hardpoint, of course. So I mean, as you can see, Skrapz had one of the best hardpoint rankings. He was in the top 5. But then you go to search and he was not that good. I mean, he was outside the top 20 in all categories in search. But yeah, so I mean, we all knew that Skrapz kind of struggled a little bit in the search and destroy, but the stats really do show that. So now moving over to the main ARs, this is really crazy. So first of all, the most obvious thing, Octane was dominant. Look at these stats here. Oh my goodness. He was the #1 hardpoint player and the #3 S&D player out of all the main ARs. Obviously, there's less main ARs, so there is only 21 players to go off of here, but Octane dominated the pack here, and there's some pretty surprising stats. So what's really interesting is how good Octane, Chino, and Weeman were versus the rest of the ARs apparently. Octane was 62% better than the next 5 ARs, but Chino was 57% better than the next 5 ARs, and Weeman was 49% better than the next 5 ARs. And so there was a big time statistical discrepancy between those guys. I mean, what's weird about that is, like, you know, versus Dashy, who was 49% better, or Simp, who was 47% better. Those are some big time discrepancies. But yeah, so I mean, if you look at this, like, Crim was a pretty reliable player, the 8th hardpoint rank, the 6th S&D rank. Well, another surprising one is Arcides, who hardpoint wise for E United, 4th, a really good main AR for him. But the S&D, he was actually 11th. So again, there's so many variables that can change the statistics. A lot of the S&D statistics are based around damage, kills, and KD ratio. So like if you're playing a little bit slower, you're a little bit of a slower player. First blood percentage as well. So the slower players do get a little bit punished in the S&D category. Playing fast in search and destroy is definitely not always an advantage. Staying alive at the end of the day is the most important thing. KD ratios do carry a little bit more weight. Mox, who was 3rd in KD, staying alive for your team, that's important in search and destroy, and it means more in search than it does in hardpoint, because hardpoint is more about the trading of the kills, the positioning, and maintaining the time in the hill. So that's why in search and destroy is a little bit of a tougher situation when it comes to stats, especially for the stats that they currently have here. But overall, it's still really telling. So again, when it comes back down to the Simp versus Dashy argument, in my mind, Dashy was a more valuable, dominant player at his position than Simp was on the season, even though Simp was a really good player. And in my mind, those two are in a tier alone above everybody else. I mean, Octane's the only one that you could consider be in their tier because he was just so dominant in the AR category. But Dashy, just in hardpoint, was so dominant. Even though it didn't translate to as many wins for Optic down the stretch, he was still so good. In my mind, just slightly better than Simp. I know it's a little bit controversial. I think a lot of people would probably choose Simp over Dashy. But at the end of the day, I'll take Dashy in Black Ops 4 over Simp just because the hardpoint power is so dominant. And hardpoint just does mean a little bit more than search does because you're more likely to play 2 hardpoint maps than you are to play 2 search and destroy maps. So at the end of the day, guys, that's the thesis. That's what's going down in this video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. Share the video if you guys really enjoy it. We're going to come out with a lot more videos. Modern Warfare comes out next weekend, so you know the strats videos are coming back. You know the gameplays are coming back. You know we're coming in hot with news and any CDL topics that we can come up with. We'll be talking about them on the channel. So I really do appreciate all the support. It means a lot to me. I'm trying to do this long term, trying to do this full time right now. And so anything that you guys can use support, I really do appreciate it. As always, guys, I'm your boy SalvationsElite, and we'll see you next time. I'm out.